Well, good evening. Okay, it's on. I didn't think it was on. I didn't hear anybody. Good evening. Okay, it's working. Good. Good to see each of you this evening. Glad you're here. Dale, what'd you do with the coffee? I think we need some. It's good to see you. I hate to come rolling in like I did right at the last minute. We got delayed just a little bit coming from Jasper, and I tried to text Dale so he wouldn't be sweating. And Dale was sweating because he left his phone in his vehicle, so he didn't get the text. And he's thinking, oh man, he's not going to be here. So I see him standing out in the parking lot. By the time we pull up, I'm thinking, okay, now he knows. So he's all right at this point. So Dale preached at the Curry congregation when I was a young man in Walker County, growing up in those parts. And so I've had a long association with Dale and a lot of those from around Walker County for a very long time. I've always admired and respected him and appreciated him. And I always enjoy the opportunities we get to spend a little bit of time together. And thankful to be here with you this evening. I'm always honored to be here. I think ever since Union has done a summer series, I've been on every one of them with the exception of one. And Tom called me one summer and he said, we're not inviting you to our summer series. And I said, Tom, you're under no obligation to invite me. That's fine. He said, no, the only reason I'm telling you that is because we want you to do our gospel meeting this summer, so you're not going to be on the summer series because of that. But I've had that privilege, known Tom and Regina a long time, and I love and appreciate them as well. It's always a joy to come this way and to see a lot of familiar faces, to meet some new ones along the way as well. And what a joy it is. Summer series, Go and Make Disciples of All Nations. As you study out of the book of Acts, we're going to be in Acts chapter 1 this evening. That's where the assigned text has come from. Verse number 8 primarily is what Tom sent me. The words of our Lord as he told his disciples, you will be witnesses of me in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and depending on the translation you read, the uttermost parts of the earth or the ends of the earth. You are going to be witnesses of me. You're going to go and tell other people about me. Now, as you're aware, as the book of Acts opens, Jesus is appearing to his disciples one final time following his resurrection, right before he ascends back to his Father in heaven. So in these moments that remain before Jesus goes back, he's still trying to prepare them for this monumental task of taking the message of the gospel to the entire world. 12 men. At this time, really only 11, right? Judas had committed suicide. They had not yet replaced him. They will shortly after Jesus ascends back into heaven. The latter part of chapter 1, Matthias is selected to take Judas' place. But here are these men who have been charged with going into all the world, preaching the gospel to every creature, Mark's account. Go and make disciples of all nations, Matthew's account. Luke's account says that repentance and remission of sin should be preached in my name among all nations, beginning at Jerusalem, Luke 24 and verse 47. Jesus gave them a monumental task, a great commission is the way we refer to that. He says, I want you to go tell all the world about me. Now, at this time, you would think that these apostles, the ones who had spent so much time with Jesus day in and day out, you would think that after so much time they would have a great understanding of the nature of the kingdom of Jesus. You would think they would figure this out. How many times, by the way, do we look back at the disciples, maybe the apostles, and we think, man, why didn't they know that? Why didn't they understand that? You know, what do we say? Hindsight is what? 20/20, right? Hindsight's 20/20. It's easy for us to read things and cast a backwards glance on the disciples, on the apostles, and think, wow, it's so easy for us to see this. Why wasn't it so easy for them? By the way, it's not as easy as we make it out to be either. Oftentimes our view of it's not what it ought to be either. But we think, boy, why didn't they get this? What was the problem? Prejudice, preconceived ideas. The entire life of the Jews, they had been led to believe or grown up thinking that this messianic kingdom was going to be some restoration of Israel to its former glory. That God somehow would take Israel and restore it to its glory days like it was under David and Solomon, when it enjoyed its greatest extent of territory and its greatest wealth. And they thought, the one who comes, this Messiah, he's going to be the great warrior king. He's going to ride in on the great white horse, you know. He's going to be that warrior who delivers us from oppression. He's going to come and deliver us from Roman rule. So as Jesus came into this world and began to teach about the Messiah and about His kingdom, it didn't mesh with their ideas. They had a hard time accepting this. They couldn't understand, why is this guy not riding in on that great white horse? Why is He not crushing the enemy underfoot? Why is He not leading us back to our former glory? And so as Jesus is preparing to leave, to go back to the Father, what question did the disciples ask Him right here in chapter 1? I believe verse number 6. Lord, will You at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? All this time, all the teaching that Jesus had done about the nature of His kingdom, and even before Pilate, John chapter 18, remember the words of Jesus in verse number 36? My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then when my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from thence. That's not the nature of my kingdom. It's not an earthly kingdom. It's not of this world. It's a spiritual kingdom. And in spite of all the teachings of Jesus over the course of His ministry, these apostles didn't always get it, did they? They didn't always understand that. And even after all this time, as He's about to go, and He's about to leave them with this task of going and telling other people about Him, they said, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? A lot of you don't know my background necessarily. I've been tutoring math for over 25 years. I've been preaching over 20 years, but I've got an engineering background. I went to engineering school out of high school. Always had a great love of math and science. I've been tutoring math since I was in high school, and I still do to this day. I love it. So a lot of times the math teachers in and around the area that know me, they'll contact me because they know if they ask me to come fill in a day or whatever for them, they'll say, hey, can you teach them this material? And they don't lose a day of instruction. They don't just have to run off a worksheet and keep them busy. So they're like, will you teach them this material? Yeah, I'll do that. And sometimes they'll call me in and say, hey, they've got a test tomorrow. Would you mind reviewing this with them? Sure, I'll be glad to. So I'll go in. I'll never forget, I was reviewing with a particular class, and we're working on absolute value equations. All right, so I kept telling them, all right, when you set up absolute value equations, how many answers are you supposed to give me? 2. You better give me 2. I made them repeat it 15 times in the course of our review of the material. 2. You're supposed to give me 2 solutions every time. All right, so we're working through all that on that review. I'm thinking, man, they got to have it. You know what happened the next day? I was there as they took the test. Guess what happened? Majority of them, they gave me 1. And I'm sitting there thinking, I just told you. I just told you while we were reviewing yesterday. You're supposed to give me 2 solutions. You gave me 1. I wonder how many times Jesus thought that about the disciples. As they're asking Him right before He ascends back to the Father, Lord, will You at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? I wonder if Jesus was thinking, man, I just had this conversation with you guys. I just told you that my kingdom is not of this world. I've been telling you that for 3+ years. That's not the nature of my kingdom. I want you to notice something rather interesting. What is the response of Jesus in verse 7? He says, it is not for you to know the times or the seasons that the Father's reserved for himself, essentially. It's not for you to worry about that kind of thing. You know, is the kingdom going to be restored to Israel? He didn't get into all the nuances about that and try to correct everything in that moment. He's just about to ascend. He said, that's not anything you need to worry yourself over. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. That's not what I want to say as I leave. That's not for you to know. By the way, sometimes we get that way about things. We want to figure out all the little details. We want to be able to tell everybody everything they're supposed to know or that we think they're supposed to know before they can follow Jesus. And so we're going to fill them up with all these things that we expect them to know because we know those things. They need to know them too, right? How long did it take you to get there, though? How long did it take you to learn a lot of the things you've learned in the course of your maturing in the faith and your study of the Word of God? It's probably taken you a lifetime to get where you are. And yet sometimes we expect those who are just coming to Jesus or that we're trying to lead to Jesus, we want them to know all these things we know. And sometimes we elevate our logic, thinking we have everything just figured out. We've got all the right answers perfectly cut and dry. You know, and instead of elevating God and His Word, sometimes we elevate our logic because we've got this all just figured out just right. I love the response of Jesus. He said, that's not for you to know. That's not for you to be concerned about. And so He leaves them with the words in verse number 8. You are going to be witnesses of me, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. I want you to go out and proclaim this message wherever you go. I want you to go out and tell other people about me. He gave them a very clear-cut mission, didn't He? Go and tell. Go and tell. Everywhere you go, I want you to tell people about me. And I want you to do it beginning right here in Jerusalem and let it radiate out. If you'll notice how that works. Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, ultimately all the earth, right? He says, here's your mission. But what can we learn from the words of Jesus here in Acts 1 and verse 8 about our mission? What do we see in these words that we can take to heart and hopefully allow us to become better at telling others about Him? We refer to that sometimes as evangelism. What do we see in these words? Three ideas I want to consider with you from this context tonight that we see in the words of Jesus. First of all, we must go everywhere with the message. We must go everywhere with the message. Now, it's logical to start where you are, right? That seems the most logical thing to do. When you think about telling people about Jesus, where do I even start? Where did Jesus tell them to start? Jerusalem. Why Jerusalem? For one, that's where they are. That's where they're located. Jesus had already instructed them, don't leave Jerusalem yet until you're endued with power from on high. That would come, Acts chapter 2, when the Holy Spirit came upon them. They began to open the doors of that kingdom in Acts chapter 2, the day of Pentecost, right? Jesus said, don't leave Jerusalem. You don't go anywhere until you receive this power from on high. So they're in Jerusalem. Very logical for them to begin there. That's where they are. He says, but then it's going to radiate outward from there. The ends of the earth. I want you to think about this. 11 people. 11 apostles. He says, I want you to tell everybody. Start right here in Jerusalem, go to Judea, Samaria, ultimately the uttermost parts of the world, the ends of the earth. 11 men. Ask yourself, or think about this within you. What if there were a group of us, 11 of us, whomever, envision whoever you want to, and somebody said, hey, I'm starting this business. I want you to advertise it for me. But I want you to get this advertising out to every corner of the globe. What would you think if somebody said that to you? What would you think? I'll tell you what I'm thinking. Are you crazy? There's 11 of us, and you somehow want us to get the word out to the whole world? Now, to be quite fair, isn't it a lot easier in our day and time to do that? You know, you share something on social media and suddenly it spreads like wildfire, right? If you can get other people to share it, and man, it goes from here to here to here, it can go around the globe in no time, right? But even then, it seems rather intimidating to think we're supposed to tell everyone. 11 of, but look at what we have at our disposal. You know, internet, cell phones, all of this. We can do all kinds of things in the blink of an eye. Here were 11 men who had to walk wherever they went. Here were 11 men who didn't enjoy broadcasting on live stream. Here were 11 men whose only audience they would ever have is whomever happens to be right there with them, right? And yet they're charged with going to the ends of the earth. To the ends of the earth. That seems so intimidating. And sometimes we might think about this idea that we too are charged with taking the gospel to the whole world. And we're intimidated to think that. You know what's even more intimidating? I think the statistic I finally found, I was looking for it, and kept getting all kinds of things, but I think I finally found a good one that said approximately 72% of the world's population never moves more than 20 miles from where they grew up. 72% of the world's population never moves more than 20 miles from home. Now think about that in connection with trying to get that message out everywhere. If 72% of the world practically stays home, then how does the message get out? How is it supposed to spread if we're staying close to home for the most part? Again, seems rather intimidating to think that he expects us to take this message to the ends of the earth. I'll be honest with you, I don't envision myself ever going to Borneo or Russia or Iceland. I don't envision myself going there. And so as I start to think that I have a responsibility to get this message out everywhere, I think of my limitations in being able to do that. I think I'm kind of handcuffed. I don't know exactly how I'm going to cause that to happen. And what happens sometimes is we get so intimidated by the idea that we're supposed to take this message to the entire world that we won't even go across the road. Because we're defeated before we ever start sometimes. We can't get this message out to the whole world. How are we supposed to do that? I'm reminded of the story about a young man was walking along the ocean, and there was a problem. The starfish had all come up on shore because of something that happened in the ocean and caused them. I remember growing up, our neighbors had a catfish pond, and I'll never forget, when I was a teenager, he called us in a panic, all the local teenage boys, and said, "Can y'all please come down to my house? The oxygen levels dropped in my pond. All the catfish are coming up on the banks. We got to get them out, skin them out. You know, something's happened." Starfish had come up on the sands of the shore, and this little boy noticed they're kind of being stranded. Tide's gone out. Now the sun is just baking those starfish. And that little boy is reaching down, he picks one up and he flings it back into the ocean, into the water. He grabs another one, he flings it back. He grabs another, he flings it back. But there are thousands upon thousands stretched out all over the shoreline. older gentleman walks by, and he kind of shakes his head. And he finally says something to the young man. He says, young man, how can you possibly think that you're going to make a difference by picking up one starfish, flinging it back in? Look at all the thousands of them that are here. You'll never be able to throw them all back in. You can't possibly really make a difference. And the young man picked up another one, flung it back in, and he said, it made a difference to that one. Made a difference to that one. Sometimes we get intimidated by this command to take the gospel everywhere, and it's so intimidating that we freeze and do nothing. We're thinking, I can't possibly accomplish that, I can't possibly do that, and we forget that we can go right across the road, or to our friend, or to our neighbor. We might not ever get to all the corners of the globe, but somebody that we reach might reach somebody who reaches somebody in those places we will never go. And before you know it, the gospel can find its way all the way around the world. You know, if we are not willing to cross the street, then we kind of miss the point of what Jesus is getting at. He says, start where you are. Start where you are. And allow it to radiate from there. And just watch what happens. You begin in Jerusalem. You tell others about me. And all of a sudden the 11 are going to become more than 11, right? And all of those who embrace that same message that they have embraced, they're going to go out and tell other people. And suddenly it's going to radiate. That's our responsibility. We're to preach the message wherever we have opportunity. We're to take this gospel wherever we go. Mark's account again, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every one of the creation. Matthew's account says, go and make disciples of all nations. Luke's account says, repentance, remission of sin should be preached in my name among all nations. Preach the message everywhere you go. I had an elder who was known to say, preach the message everywhere you go, and if necessary, use words. And by that he meant you live it. You preach it by the way you live it, right? That's how you proclaim the message. And when you have opportunity, maybe really open up a dialogue, teach them about Jesus. So we must go everywhere with the message. But something else that stands out in the words of Jesus to his disciples is that we must go to everyone with that message. Go to everyone with that message, right? Now, I want you to start in Jerusalem, where you are, among the people you know, right? Now, they're from this area. They're around a lot of people who are very familiar to them. He says, start right there. Start with the people who are your family, your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers. That's an easy place for us to begin because you know them, right? You know what's kind of ironic about that? Especially in our day and time, there's some irony here because Jesus says start where you are and start among people you know. But today, how many people have a hard time talking about Jesus to people you know? I know a lot of people who would rather talk to a complete stranger about Jesus than to people they know. That's just kind of weird, isn't it? Why would we rather talk to people we don't know about Jesus than to talk to those we do know? Why do we have that difficulty sometimes? I think I know what part of it is. And I admit to you, sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do, is it? To talk to the ones you know. Maybe you're afraid you'll upset them. Maybe you're afraid they'll think you're strange. By the way, if they know you well, they already know you're strange, okay? So they already know that. So just get over that, by the way. Maybe they'll think we're just a fanatic, you know. I don't know. Sometimes I think we handcuff ourselves with those kind of ideas. Oh, I can't talk to them about Jesus, you know. They'll think I'm strange. They'll think I'm over the edge. We need to start with the ones we know. We need to teach them the message of the gospel. We need to reach out to them to encourage them to follow Jesus. What a great place to begin. But here's the thing. As Jesus said, you go from Jerusalem to Judea. Okay, that's natural. That's still among their own people, right? The Jews were going to go out, radiate into our own people. But then what did Jesus say? And to Samaria. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. You're telling me you want us to go to the Samaritans? We're supposed to go there and tell them? Now, you know the history between the Jews and the Samaritans, right? You know that they were sworn enemies. They did not like each other. And hatred, by the way, went both ways. They despised one another. The Samaritan race arose, if you'll remember, during the days of the Assyrians. Assyria would go out and conquer a nation and would often move people from other areas they had conquered into those areas. And so when Assyria conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, they removed most of the Israelites, took them away. They brought in other nations and transplanted them into Israel. And so what happened over the course of time? The Israelites who remained intermarried with people from other nations. And voila, we have the Samaritans. So the Jews looked upon the Samaritans as half-breeds. They couldn't stand them. They were dogs. They were unclean. Samaritans didn't much like the Jews either. The hatred, again, went both ways. The Jews were so notorious for despising the Samaritans that if they were making their way from Jerusalem to the Sea of Galilee, for instance, the straightest distance was to go through Samaria, but they would go out of their way. They would cross over the Jordan River and go to the east side of the Jordan, go north till they got above Samaria, and then cross back over the Jordan to make their way to Galilee. They would go way out of their way to avoid it. So in John chapter 4, you'll remember when Jesus was preparing to make his way that direction, and they thought he's going to bypass it like all Jews do. Jesus said, what? No, we're going through Samaria. He encountered the woman at Jacob's well. They were blown away by that. And when the woman encountered Jesus, she was kind of blown away by that, right? She's like, wait a minute, what are you doing here? They didn't like each other. They couldn't stand each other. And yet Jesus said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go and tell people in Jerusalem. I want you to go tell people in Judea. And then I want you to go tell people in Samaria. Oh, really? I got to go tell the stinking Samaritans. I got to go talk to them. But then Jesus adds something else. He says, and to the ends of the earth. Now that doesn't necessarily register with us. That just means the far reaches of the world. But to the Jews, what did the ends of the earth represent? Gentiles. That was outside their zip code, right? That was outside of their territory. And so everybody outside of Judea, if you're not a Samaritan, guess what you are? Gentile. They didn't like them either, did they? They didn't much care for them. Jesus said, I want you to take my message to the Samaritans. I want you to take my message to the Gentiles. I want you to take it to everyone. Everyone deserves the opportunity to hear the message. Everyone should be told about me. But brethren, sometimes if we're not careful, we're very selective in our evangelism. We're selective at times in those we reach out to. Because sometimes we want them to match up with our identity, if you will. You go and you find that nice young family who's got young kids. Perfect, right? That's what we're looking for. Give me that mom and dad and that 2.5 kids, and just be perfect. The model family. But we forget, the model family is not usually the model family, is it? I wish that were representative of our world, of our society, but the truth is that a lot of families don't fit that identity. A lot of families are broken, aren't they? A lot of families are struggling in a lot of ways, and maybe they don't fit our mold, and maybe we're a little hesitant about reaching out to them. I know most brethren have good intentions, and I'm not trying to come down on you. I know if people come in here, I have a feeling you're gonna rally around whomever it might be, whether that person's that good-looking family or whether it's the person who comes in disheveled, dirty. They deserve an opportunity to hear the message. Maybe it's the one who comes in with all kinds of piercings and tattoos, and you know what? They deserve to hear the message. They deserve an opportunity. And brethren, if we look at someone and if we somehow say, you know what? They're not going to listen if I tell them. Do you understand you're making the decision for them? And that's not our decision to make. That's not our decision to make. Jesus simply told us to go everywhere and tell everyone. Even those we think may not fit. Even those we think may never listen to the message. You know what? If the Lord Himself had ever looked at people and thought, this one would never listen to the message, do you think Paul would have ever been an apostle? I'm pretty certain Paul would never have been one, because when he tried to come and join himself to the brethren, remember their reaction? What did they say? You know, this is a trick. He's like the wolf in sheep's clothing. He's trying to get in the hen house, and then he's going to devour us. Barnabas thankfully spoke up on his behalf, and he said, no, I'm telling you, his conversion is true. But maybe the brethren would have never gone to Paul, because what would they think? This man kills Christians. There's no way he's going to want to become one. We've got to go everywhere with a message. We've got to tell everyone the message. Colossians 1 and verse 23, Paul said that in his time, the gospel had been proclaimed to every creature under heaven. In his time. Without the advantages that we have, Paul said, we've taken the message everywhere and proclaimed it to everyone. That's amazing, isn't it? But I want you to think about this. Not only are we to take the message everywhere, and not only are we to take that message to everyone, but third and finally, we must take that message every day. We've got to take that message everywhere, to everyone, every day. Now, there may be a possibility that in our lifetime, and it's likely the case, we make it to the ends of the earth with a message. We can spread it pretty well everywhere by virtue of the technology and all the things that we have today. You know, we can get into some of the most isolated places in the world now. And maybe there comes a time where we actually cover the whole globe with a message. But because of life and death, we'll never cover everyone. We won't cover everyone. Why? Because the world is expanding so quickly, faster than we can keep up with it, right? There's always new ones coming into this world. And so what does that mean for us? We can't stop. We can't stop. Because there's never a point at which we're going to be able to say, aha, we've done it. We've proclaimed it to everyone and everywhere. That message keeps on going. It's got to continue. We cannot stop. We can never rest thinking that we've accomplished what we want to accomplish. What does that mean? Keep preaching and teaching the Word. Dale, how long have you been preaching in some capacity? 30 plus years. I just finished a gospel meeting last night, as a matter of fact. A rather interesting one for me personally. The elders asked if my family would conduct this gospel meeting. So my father, my older brother, my younger brother, and I did the preaching during the meeting and the song leading as well. My dad, just 2 days prior to the meeting beginning, turned 80 years old. 80 years old. He's been preaching all my life in some capacity. All my life. He's been preaching over 50 years. He turns 80. He doesn't look it. He's still going. He's still preaching. And he understands his responsibility. He's still got to teach and preach. Can he do it to the extent he once did? Does he have the energy and all of that he once did? Well, no, he's 80 years old. But he still does what he can, because we have to take the message every day. We cannot stop. We can't come along and say, you know what, if I take a break, somebody else will do it. Somebody else will do it. I remember the words of a song I heard many years ago. It was a song by the group a cappella, but the chorus of the song says, everybody said that anybody could do all the things somebody should do. Everybody knows that anybody could do all the good things that nobody did. Sometimes we assume somebody else can do this. And you know what happens when all of us make the assumption that somebody else will do it? Nobody does it. Nobody does it. And so we have a responsibility to keep on preaching the message. Now you might be thinking, but boy, isn't that a long time? Man, I'm only 20 years old and you're telling me I got to do this until I die? That seems intimidating, right? What if I live to be 90 years old? You're telling me I have to do this for 70 years? In this way. Just preach it today. Be faithful to God today. Live for Him today. Don't worry about 70 plus years. Be faithful today. Tell other people today. Proclaim the message today. You know what happens if the Lord blesses us with another day and I see another sunrise? That becomes today, doesn't it? I live today for Him. I live faithfully today. I proclaim the message today. And if I'll do that, I'll be faithful all my days. I'll proclaim the message all my days because I did it today. The words of Jesus encourage us to go take this message everywhere, to proclaim it to everyone, and to do it every day. That was the mission He gave these 11 men. That's the very same mission He's giving us today. And we've got to accept that mission. He would look at us and probably say a lot of the same things He said to His apostles. There's some things I know you want to know, but you don't need to worry about that. It's not for us to know. But here's what we do know. Let's go everywhere and tell everyone every day. That's our mission. Whether you choose to accept it or not, that's your mission, and that's mine. And I pray we honor God by accepting it and embracing it with all that we have, with every ounce of our being. I thank you for the opportunity to be with you as always. Appreciate your kind attention. And I pray that in some respect this has blessed your life tonight. I know it has blessed mine. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you.